director of the USC Consortium for Gender, Sexuality, Race, and Public Culture. The consortium is a Mellon-funded project. It's been around since 2020. And one of our main goals is to translate our research across numerous disciplines for the public sphere. Also, one of the main features of the consortium is that we have a podcast network, which includes not only podcasts and also web series by faculty about topics related to their research, but also across the US and in different institutions. Not only across the US, actually we had a collaboration with the University of Sydney as well. So the Feminist Keywords podcast is a collaboration with the University of Buffalo. And we also are working on the People's Guide podcast series, which is a collaboration with the University of California Press. In any case, we thought it best to have a discussion and conversation also about podcasts, how they work, how they expand your educational experience, and how they may be the medium through which you can do some of your research. And there's no better guest to have here to do that with us than Paola Mardo, who is seated right here. Paola is a writer and producer based in Los Angeles. She's Senior Vice President, SVP?
Apparently, yeah.
Head of Audio at Ryan Coogler's Proximity Media, where she directs, produces, and hosts their Webby Award-winning flagship podcast, In Proximity. She's hosted, directed, and produced special series about proximity projects, including Sinners, Ironheart, and Wakanda Forever, the official Black Panther podcast. That was written and hosted by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and also won the 2024 NAACP Image Award and Webby Award. Paola will learn more about this, was born in Los Angeles' historic Filipino town, but raised in Manila and Kuala Lumpur, which is in Malaysia, and the San Francisco Bay Area. And she adapted these personal experiences as a teenage immigrant into the project called Long Distance, which is a podcast and short documentary series about stories in the Filipino diaspora, as well as winner of the inaugural Google Podcast Creator Program. Paola and I met because we were both invited to do a Filipino food crawl with KCRW's Good Food. So they took us around. Yeah, it was a really great thing to do.
Yeah.
They took us around. We ate a bunch of food and talked about it.
Yes, went to different neighborhoods, Eagle Rock, Glassell Park.
Yeah.
Went to the mall, ate at Jollibee.
Exactly.
Just ate food and people recorded us for a radio story.
Exactly, which was really wonderful. A great day, right? We're talking about the flavor of a Jollibee mango pie,
yes.
Right?
Oh my God.
So in any case, welcome, Paola.
Thank you.
So by way of introduction, beyond me just talking about you or reading a bio, why don't we have a bunch of clips from different projects that you participated in. And I want to start with Long Distance because, essentially, I think we'll play the clips and then we can talk a little bit about what made you decide to take on this project.
Yeah, so I'll play the first two clips first. Basically, they were trailers. So Long Distance was a narrative podcast. And I say was because it's on hiatus, but it exists. You can still listen to it. And there was a first season that I produced independent. And then when we got into the Google Podcast program, they gave us a little bit of funding and I was able to do the second season. But this was like early days of podcasting. I mean, obviously This American Life already existed, but it was like, Gimlet, like those kinds of more narrative shows were starting to come up. But we didn't have like the big chat show podcast I think you guys are more familiar with these days. And the celebrity hosted like celebrities on podcasts was not a thing. And this was like, I don't know, 8 years ago, so not even that long. So anyway, this was the trailer we made for the podcast. And I think something different that we were doing, and when I say we, it's me and my co-producer, Patrick Capino, who did all the video elements for the show. We were always on YouTube. Patrick has a background doing digital content and a YouTube channel. And way before any podcasts were on there, well, maybe except for some I don't want to name, but we were kind of early to YouTube, and I can talk about why later, but I'll play this. So this is available on a regular podcast feed, but also we made a kind of visual version of it for YouTube. And it's very early and crude, so I've done more stuff since this.
Ever get the question, where are you from? No, where are you really from? I do, and I hate it. I know what they want to hear, and my answer is kind of complicated. I'm Paola Mardo, and this is Long Distance, Filipino audio stories set a long way from home. What does it mean to be Filipino outside of the homeland? To grow up there and have to leave it? Or what if you've never been there at all? The Philippines has one of the largest diaspora populations in the world. Most of those people are in the United States, and that's where we're going this season. So if you're into it, subscribe to Long Distance on your favorite podcast app, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or visit longdistanceradio.com to learn more. The trailer's on there right now. First episode drops on October 15th. See you then.
Little indie pod.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll play the season 2 trailer where you got a little bit of money, a little bit of funding from Google, and traveled a little bit more. And so here's this version.
Growing up, I wanted to be a lot of things. A writer, a detective, an MTV VJ. Mostly, I like recording things, just like this.
What about you? How did you spend your sem break, huh? Whatever.
In school, I started to learn about history, literature, and the political events that shaped the Philippines, the country where I spent most of my young life. But at 15, my family and I moved to America, and I left the home I was just getting to know behind. Fast forward to the present, and I'm kind of doing the same thing I was before, just in a different way. Recording stories about people like me, living in places far from where our people come from. Because for as long as I can remember, I'd never really seen or heard stuff like this before. This is Long Distance, a podcast and documentary series about stories in the Filipino diaspora. And this season, we're going deep into the past to make sense of our present. I'm your host, Paola Mardo. Tune in to Long Distance at longdistanceradio.com.
We're about to go on a trip to back of the day.
That is real family home footage.
And what year was season 2?
2019. So I did the first one in 2018, second one 2019. I mean, this is like a little indie podcast, you know. Yeah.
Well, and you went to USD, right? You got a master's degree
Yes.
at
the journalism,
Annenberg,
yeah.
right? And so did you start thinking about or doing a kind of audio series, or were you thinking about podcasting as a medium then?
Oh, yeah.
Or what brought you to, doing this?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I got my start in the film industry. I worked a bunch of different jobs, film festivals, publicity, marketing, production companies. And at some point, I mean, I'd always been interested in making things. I did musical theater growing up, you know, directed and produced a lot of plays in college. But, you know, I mean, I didn't have family in the entertainment industry or even in like media or the arts. Creative people in my family, yes, but I didn't have people in my family who did this kind of thing. So I didn't really have like a roadmap, I guess. But I listened to Serial, a podcast that came out in, I think, 2014. Feels so long ago, but it really just blew my mind. And I think I'd been working for a couple of years already. And I was like, man, that's so interesting. I want to tell stories like that. Why did I spend like 6 hours driving from the Bay Area to LA just listening to one thing? So that's how I got into it. And I was working a full-time job at a production company, making a little podcast, not this one, but a different one, where I was just kind of practicing and interviewing people and just fell in love with making something, booking, interviewing, researching, and then teaching myself how to edit audio. So I guess long story short, I was already sort of doing the podcast thing, but then I had heard that USC had an arts journalism program and a radio program. I don't know if they had like podcasting just yet, but I don't know, journalism, radio, it just kind of piqued my interest. And so I applied and yeah, so I got in. And when I went in, I was just sort of laser focused into wanting to make a narrative podcast because that's something I hadn't done before I got here. And there was no class for that, but there was like a radio documentary class. So I kind of created a curriculum of my own to sort of teach me how to do that.
So inspired by the kind of radio documentary narrative series, something like Serial, that's when you took on your project of the long distance project and decided to kind of focus on using an auditory medium to tell your story.
Yeah, yes. And we had to do like a thesis project and honestly, I didn't set out to like I'm Filipino American, but I didn't like set out to like tell these stories at all. But when I think the assignment was to like come up with a thesis project and also I wanted it to be like a narrative storytelling show. And somewhere in my research, I learned about tiki bars and that Filipino immigrants in like the 20s and 30s were like the first tiki bartenders. Like they didn't start the bars, but they were the guys mixing the thing, even though they were Pacific Islanders. So I just found that so interesting and wanted that to be my investigative story that I would pursue in the medium of a podcast. So yeah.
And so that's what's launched it all, was that particular story.
Yeah, just like my interest in it and wanting to, yeah, just learn about that world, meet people, and then kind of how to creatively tell that story through audio.
And that was about 8 years ago, and you referred to learning how to do audio editing and that kind of thing. Truthfully, producing a podcast at this point, it used to be more complicated, right? And I think that my own experience of doing it, I think that I started just accidentally ended up as a guest on a podcast and then just kept guesting on a pop culture podcast until they asked me to be one of the co-hosts.
Yeah.
That was around 2015, 16.
Yeah,
so
I know you're
almost-
like a veteran in this
which is
space,
weird,
so.
which is about 10 years ago. But like when I think about like in those days, you showed up at a studio, you recorded, like you have all these clips of you recording in a kind of designated, acoustically, perfect space or whatever, or like at least designated space for recording podcasts. And then, someone had to do the editing and the post-production and that kind of thing. And for a lot of folks, they taught themselves how to do that, as you taught yourself how to do that in certain platforms. Nowadays, you can use any one of a number of online platforms. You don't even need to be in the same space. And I mean, technically you don't. I mean, it would sound better.
Yeah, there's remote ways of doing it.
And then you can just basically kind of, at least I know in Riverside FM, you see the transcribed
you can like edit, there's
conversation.
platforms now where you can edit the transcript instead of going like a DAW or like.
And you like basically cut things out, like as if you were working in a Word document, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that has evolved in that process. Tell me a little bit about like what you see as the kind of most important skills from having done the kind of earlier work 10-ish or 8 to 10 years ago, and then adapting to the new technologies and what you wished people kept from the techniques from that time and period.
It's a good question. I mean, there are different kinds of podcasts, right? Just like film and TV, there are different genres. There are the more narrative storytelling kind, just sort of like the This American Life shows, what I was doing with long distance. And then there are, in the industry, we call it chat shows, but they're essentially the talk show style podcasts. And I like them both, and I make both. And I think a crucial skill, those, platforms are great, honestly. If they existed before, I know there's like a school of podcasters or radio people who are like, no, we will edit in Pro Tools and nothing else. And that's fine, I do it, but I'm also like, man, it'd be so easy to just like edit a script. But I think just knowing, depending on the kind of show you're making, if it's a talk show, a chat show, putting together questions or helping the host put together questions if you're the producer that, create an interesting conversation and you do your research about the guest or your audience. The show I produce and host now, in Proximity, I talk to a lot of creatives about their process. And one thing we're always thinking about is like, how do we make this conversation different than any other film or TV podcast? And we do like a lot of, we find out what podcasts have they been on, what do they usually get asked in interviews, and what actually get on pre-interview. I don't know if you do this for your show, but I'll get on the phone like 20 minutes before I actually record with them. In journalism world, we call it like a pre-interview. I just call it a pre-call so it doesn't feel like this like crazy interview, but we just get on the phone and ask them like, what haven't you been asked ever? And what do you want to talk about? And I don't always just ask them that, but it gives me an idea of like, okay, here's something they've never been asked and that they'd be really excited to talk about. And then I think about, okay, our audience is like young, POC filmmakers. Like, what would they want to hear from this person? So I guess from those two sort of elements, I try to craft like a really good, hopefully, engaging interview. And then if you do a narrative show, I don't know, I guess just, it's so hard. I don't call myself a journalist, even though I went to journalism school, but I wanted to be Sarah Koenig, but ended up making some other thing. But I think just if you are telling a story, if you're not a trained journalist, you don't have to be this strict about it, but just sort of try to get to the heart of your story, the who, what, when, where, why. Like, I feel like a lot of stuff can feel a little bit surface level. I mean, there are a lot of true crime shows and they make a ton more money than I do. But like sometimes they just sound like Wikipedia, you know what I mean? Like a Wikipedia article being read aloud. Just doing a little bit more research and fact checking and things like that. I think those are important. You don't want to put, untrue information out there about something.
And I think that what you underscored is like some level of preparation. I think that there is this sort of impression, because there are some podcasts where it seems like somebody's just sitting there rambling for hours or what have you, and that people find it compelling, some people
Some
find it
people love it,
compelling.
and that's
Some
great.
people, yeah, that's
If that's your
great.
show, that's great.
But yeah, but for the most part, it really helps to have a kind of repeated structure at least, or an outline. I think that, that's what we've sort of shared with at least some of the academics that we've talked to about
Yeah.
doing these podcasts, is sort of like, number one, remember to create an outline so that, just like segments, even thinking
Yes.
about different
Yes.
parts that you want to hit, especially in talk show. And then B, just sort of remember also that there is production and post-production. So there's this kind of sense of like producing spontaneity and being able to talk off the cuff, which is great. But if you want to like rephrase that, you can go back, right? It's important for people to understand those fundaments of it. But yeah, and I think that also with narrative podcasts, it's sort of listen to a bunch of things. Think about what you want to hear and what is compelling for you as a listener, because not every style, right, is going to fit with
Yeah.
the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah, there's this podcast, it's on YouTube. It's by a journalist actually. God, what is it? It's PTF, Pablo Torre Finds Out. Former ESPN journalist. And it's interesting. It's like formatted like a chat show, but there are some episodes that are narrative. Like there was this one story, I won't go too deep in the weeds on it, but basically they found like, okay, that will go, I'm gonna go too deep in the weeds. It's narrative and it's really interesting. I think they got nominated for a Peabody, but it still felt like a narrative piece, but it was like him and the reporter talking in studio, and then cut to a clip, and then cut to a video of him interviewing the person he was interviewing. So I found it so interesting because it's made for YouTube. It's a chat show, but I could listen to it without watching and still feel like engaged, but it was really beautifully done. So I don't know. and it still felt like they were talking off the cuff.
Yeah,
So that was really kind of cool to see how,
yeah, and we can remember, you can create that feel without necessarily
yeah.
performing it in that way or that
Yeah,
form.
yeah, but they still had, yeah, like segments and they had a structure for sure. And I think you go into that, I think in radio, they call it like a two-way when a host, like an NPR host, talks to a reporter like, hey, tell me about this thing you went and reported out. It always sounds off the cuff, but they actually both have the questions and they know what they're gonna talk about. How they talk about it is like live, but
Mhm.
they actually have a structure going into it. And I feel like even, chat shows like Amy Poehler has a great talk
Mhm.
show. And I actually found it very heartwarming to watch. And part of that is like host personality. That's stuff you can't teach, right? You can practice it maybe. But she does go in with a set of questions. She's got her laptop out, she's got her questions, but then she'll have her, she's an improv person, so she'll go off the cuff as well. So I think she has segments too, like the Q&A phone call from like a friend, and
Yeah.
then they end with like, I forgot what you call it, but her
Yeah.
recommendations.
So early on, you said you did a visual component to long
Yes.
distance.
Yes.
Which which we saw, right? And even some of the video, you see a lot of the behind the scenes, the BTS of it all. Nowadays, like one of the things that people talked about with podcasts was the promise of like, the low and the low barrier to
Yeah.
doing one, right? Because and especially I think that they kind of exploded during the COVID
100%.
lockdown era
Yeah.
because people discovered that they could record on Zoom and, it didn't take much.
And no
in
one
the
was
way of doing it.
producing anything
Yeah,
outside of the house, so.
yeah, so people, that was a big period.
Yeah.
But in the last couple of years, I've noticed, there's been an increasing shift. And indeed, even a kind of demand for like, video, or especially even with chat shows. You host a chat show that is at once a podcast and that is also on video, and that's available for us to consume as, we watch you interview different performers or crew folks or writers or creatives, related to what In Proximity does. So do you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about why there's this,
Yeah.
this auditory medium has now become a visual medium?
I mean, why? Because we are visual creatures and, the number one problem with podcasting since the beginning was discoverability. It was always so hard to discover a new show on your own, like word of mouth is always a big thing. That's why a lot of podcasts, would end with like shared with a friend or whatever, because recommendations is like the most, like, it's how I'm sure a lot of you guys, how I heard of a lot of podcasts, especially early on. And it became really impossible to share audio or clips of podcasts on social media, which is where everyone lives now. At one point, they were animating, I don't know if you tried to do this, audiograms
Yeah, the
happen.
audiograms, yeah.
Where it was like a clip, and they would have like apps that would do this, like they would clip from your podcast and be like a waveform. But, like no one
Maybe
wants to
some
watch a
captions.
waveform. Yeah, I know, some captions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think that's really it, and everyone's just on social media all the time. And nowadays, I think not most, I don't know the numbers, but I do know people consume the clips on TikTok or whatever more than they do listen to the whole or watch the whole. So as part of that, it's discoverability was hard being audio only. And also, I mean, YouTube, to be honest, and that's why we always wanted to be on YouTube since the beginning. Everyone's on there, it's easy to find stuff, and it's easy to get your stuff out there. The algorithm, if you kind of learn to work with it, if you find out what works for your show, it can help you. And I'm learning that right now, actually. Thumbnails are like a big thing. Those of you who do YouTube probably know this, but like, man, you can like A/B test different thumbnails and different titles.
Hmm.
And yeah, sometimes it's just all about the right,
The caption,
the
like
right the right
thumbnail.
title with the right, I mean, we had Steve Gerke, he's a script supervisor on Sinners. And he's also longtime script supervisor for Christopher Nolan. And, amazing guy, like veteran of the industry, but he's not like a household name. So we were like, okay, look up Christopher Nolan, Ryan Coogler content on YouTube. What should we do? And like, man, we would find thumbnails like literally it said Nolan and like four stills from his movies, it would have like 2 million views. So yeah, I mean, we didn't exactly do that, but we were like, okay, people like that. How do we sort of like, I think the thumbnail is sort of like the hook, you know, it's not the full meal, but it's sort of like the little appetizer to kind of whet your algorithm feed or whatever. But yeah, I think I went on a whole YouTube tangent. What was the question?
No, that's great. Actually, we should probably show a couple of, because you have, do you wanna play like a short
Ooh, yeah.
sample, which?
I mean, I'll show you guys how so I do this other show now, and it's a little bit different than this, and I'll play the intro, because also the intro on YouTube, I'm sure you guys know, like the first 5-10 seconds, sometimes even 3, can like make or break if someone's gonna watch. So her name is Dolly Lee. She's a documentarian and journalist, and she was also a cultural consultant on Sinners. She consulted on the Delta Chinese sort of history of the film. She made a doc about them. And I interviewed her, and I'll play the cold open and the intro just so you see sort of how we do the podcast thing on video.
I remember being asked about these lines about licking. You know, there's so many classic examples of terrible stereotypes. We have come so far.
You guys hear the beginning?
Yeah.
You're watching and listening to In Proximity. I'm Paola Mardo, and today we're talking sinners and history. Dolly Lee is a journalist and documentary filmmaker, and her film, The Untold Story of America's Southern Chinese, led her to become a consultant on the film Sinners. In Sinners, a Chinese-American couple, Grace and Bo Chow, played by Lee Jun Lee and Yao, own 2 grocery stores, one that serves Black customers and another that serves white customers. In the documentary about the Mississippi Delta Chinese, Dolly interviewed 4th and 5th generation Chinese Americans who grew up in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where Sinners is actually set, and also in the grocery stores that are shown in the movie. On this episode, Dolly talks about her work as a historical consultant on the film Sinners and her process as a journalist, documentary filmmaker, and visual artist. We go deep in this episode. Here's my conversation with Dolly Lee.
So, there are other shows that I think do a lot more of like snappy clip, snappy clip, snappy clip. We do like a little bit of polish in what we do, I guess. But when we did this audio only, number one, the intros were so long. We were like Terry Gross, like long bio of the guest with beautiful music underneath. And then when we started producing it for video, we were like, oh man, like, is it too long? And what's the visual component? And one of my dreams was to be an MTV VJ growing up. If anyone ever knows what that, I don't know if you guys know.
Well, now that MTV is completely sunsetted,
MTV, I know,
it's like,
it's basically TikTok.
Yeah.
But I don't know, that dream came in handy because we were like, you know what? Actually, I recorded these initially after the interviews. We were like, after the interview, let's shoot the quick, intro. But we did a first cut of this, and like, man, I looked exhausted. I like was typing furiously trying to write my script. I didn't have it memorized, and it was just bad. And but I shared it with our team, and I got some feedback because that's the editorial process. You want to get notes and feedback and collaboration. And it was someone suggested like, hey, why don't you just do, because I've done stuff on social media. They're like, why don't you just do something different, what you've been doing on social, be a little bit more you, blah, blah, blah. And so we got rid of the script that I would write on a computer, stood up, I was sitting down, and just sort of did a more like free form version of this, which those of you who probably do TikTok all day, like are pros at this already, but I was not. So anyway, it just kind of made it feel fun and a little bit more YouTube friendly. But I'll just play real quick. So that clip, she talks about the lines about licking that she was contacted about. I just find it to be interesting because at our production company, we were like, man, is this too risque to talk about licking? And we're like, it's in the movie. And also like, why not? People want to hear about it. But what I love about this is this is the kind of thing you can do in a podcast that I feel like, I don't know if you can do in other kinds of shows where, yes, there's like a fun part of the conversation, but then she like goes kind of deep into like the history of, anyway, I won't spoil it. but
Sure.
I will fix the audio before we play, which I should have done.
I don't know if it's like funny scenes or moments. I want to go back to that, what you mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
You would get concepts of scenes and then you have to figure something out about it. Like,
Yes.
can you name some examples?
I remember being asked about these lines about licking and being asked whether those lines, like what dialect those lines should be in. And I was just like,
First of all, was this on email or was this like a very important Zoom call where they were like,
this first started over email.
Okay.
This is like after we had already started working together.
Yeah. Do you remember who emailed you or who contacted you first?
Yeah, I believe it was Sev, or it might have been Wei as well.
Yes, Sev Ohanyan, our founder and a producer on the film, and also Wei Wing Lao, Sev's assistant.
Monetize the channel.
But I get this email about what dialect this line should be in, and it's something about being licked, right? And I was just like, whose line is this? I was like, what's happening for that?
And it's like a dry email. Can you please advise?
And they're like,
Wow.
what dialect should this be in? And I'm like,
and you responded with
I responded with that era. Most of the immigrants came from either Canton or Toisan, but the early immigrants really did come from Toisan. And a lot of them could speak Cantonese, but I was like, if you want to be super accurate, Toisan, but how many people will understand it? Not that many. You
Right.
could go with Cantonese and easily get away with it, and maybe a smaller, not very big community, or like a slightly larger, not very big community would understand.
yeah.
But I love that they went all the way and chose Toisan.
I think I know what this scene is. Toisan and Cantonese.
So that's a little excerpt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you learn a little bit about a historical dialect, like
Yeah.
spoken regionally in a particular moment in the early 20th century. And that's all this information that, perhaps if delivered in another format would be less absorbing.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially now that I'm hosting this show and it's so like it's film and TV, and those of you who listen to these kinds of podcasts, like sometimes it does feel like, I mean, they become part of the publicity circuit for like new movies or TV shows. And I think internally we've talked a lot about that. Like, do we want to do one of these shows that like, people, stop at when they're promoting a new film? I mean, yes, it would be great, but and probably better for like our SEO views, whatever. But I think what's cool about this is that we can go deep on topics that, surface level, it feels like we're just talking about a movie and this woman is part of it. Like, you don't know this person, but she did this cool thing. But she goes pretty deep, and then she's a journalist and also a visual artist. So got to talk to her about her process in those fields and how that sort of, grew her practice as a storyteller and led her to work on the movie. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can learn different things and, and not just be as part of the junket where Jamie Lee Curtis keeps saying it's about trauma, it's trauma. When she's talking about the Halloween films, it's like that super cut of her saying,
I mean,
it's
yeah.
trauma. Yeah.
Yes. Or like the Wicked, like what are they holding their hand?
Yeah, is it like holding space?
Holding space.
Yeah, holding space. So, well, I'm sure folks have questions and other sorts of, things they to inquire about, like maybe curiosity about other aspects of doing the thing that you're doing now. Also, by the way, like I'm on the Radio Angelino listserv, and you guys have been hiring quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
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 Anyway.
Hiring.
Yeah. In any case, audio professionals or what have you.
Audio pros.
So we'll open up now for questions and conversation. Yeah.
When you guys took the jump from straight audio to audio and visual, did you see a spike in views or
Yeah. Yes. And that's why, I mean, YouTube has been so great for us because we're not part of a network, and we self-finance and produce and distribute and market the show. It's like our little indie podcast. And I mean, we're sort of, it's like the creator model. So YouTube's been really great for discoverability and growing. And I mean, obviously, we've been very strategic releasing episodes in line with our project, so that's helped. But even, I mean, we're putting out shows right now that they're not, even though they don't have like a big celebrity or known figure in them, doing quite well and people are finding it on YouTube. So it's been really cool. We do monetize the channel. We don't put like where the ads should be. So YouTube does that. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to deal with that. But man, they really pick it's like, if you really want to hear the thing, here's the ad right before you have to watch it.
What is the threshold for monetizing something? Like, how, you said when we monetize the channel, how does that happen? Because I think we
Oh,
hear
yeah.
that all the time, but.
Oh man, on YouTube, I think you need a certain number of followers or subscribers, and I say it's 7,000, but I can't like off the top. I'm sure you can look it up. But once you hit a number of subscribers, if you can keep up posting videos in some kind of regular cadence, again, I don't remember what the numbers are. Basically, your channel has to be active. You have to have a certain set of numbers, and then you can start to monetize.
Okay.
So it's different on podcasts, right? There are different platforms that I don't know, we use Simplecast. And basically it's like a platform that once you upload to there, they kind of distribute your podcast across to YouTube or to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then all the other smaller podcast platforms. They don't have, well, they do have a monetization feature, but like there's a lot more sort of requirements, and it's just not as simple and user friendly as YouTube. So right now, YouTube's been pretty great.
Yeah, we typically just use like RSS
Yeah.
feed, and I don't even know the user has chosen
Yeah.
to do, but yeah. Other questions?
I'm unfamiliar with like the podcast world, but when you're getting a guest, like do you typically reach out to them? Do they reach out to you? How does it work? Like, do you compensate them, or do they like I'm
No,
not familiar with
no,
No,
it's
it's a
great.
great
so like
question.
Really
how does
good
that
question.
work? Because I'm in the music world, so like is there like royalties? Like how
Yeah, I mean, it's a form of publicity. So traditionally, there's no money exchange. You don't pay a guest. I know there are some podcasts that maybe do, but it's not a common practice. And journalistically, like journalists don't like to pay sources or guests or whatever. But because you're featuring them on your platform, it's kind of like publicity for them. So why not? It's both ways. So we go out and pitch people. Sometimes it's through connections we have. Sometimes I just like cold message people. We have like a fun segment where we ask on this new season where we ask friends or collaborators of our guests to send surprise voice memos. I've like cold messaged and DM'd the most random like actors, rappers, anything. And sometimes they actually do respond. It's amazing. But yeah, you don't pay them to be on the show or to do any of that. And then once our shows start to get sort of more known, we get people pitching us either through publicists or sometimes themselves. So
Yeah, so booking is often,
it's a whole job in itself.
it is,
Really.
and it be time consuming when you're doing a kind of talk show or planning for a season. For this season of
Yeah.
The Art of Grief, for example, we've reached out to several guests. Often they're kind of people who are adjacent to our networks or what have you. And then, but we've also received pitches.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're the most random pitches
Yes.
too, where it's just like someone has contorted or shoehorned it. It's like this,
Yeah.
this, like,
They like
I don't know,
craft a
this
pitch that
album's
fits the
about
thing.
grief or whatever, but it's like, has nothing to do with it really. So,
Yeah. It's like honestly, I do a lot of the booking still, so we're still that small, but I have worked with the booker before. Like there are people who actually do this. And actually I executive produced a show for Apple a couple years ago where we had like a professional talent booker. I think he had worked on Ellen or something. So he had all the contacts, publicists and like all that. So there's people like that who can just like, open up their phone book or whatever and like hit up whoever. But Sometimes if you're starting out like us or more indie, you go through like friend of a friend, or like, oh, you've worked with so-and-so, can you like hit him up, or cold
How much
message.
do you pay a professional booker, do you know?
Oh man, the rates range. There's like a more indie scale, and then there's more pro. I don't know what, that was beyond my pay grade.
That was the Apple,
That was the
also Apple
budget,
money,
yeah,
right?
separate
It was
workshop.
Apple money for that. Yeah. Yes,
Thank you for coming here. Two questions. I heard about proximity from my youngest sister. She interned with you.
Yeah,
I
Nora.
wanted to know more about the process of making these companion episodes she told me about.
Yeah.
Previously, I used to help Todd 91.1, the first Tagalog radio station in Dubai, with their marketing. I wanted to ask you also, what was it like to grow the global audience for your long distance with the Filipino diaspora, like in countries like cities like Dubai and around the world?
Yeah, I'll answer that question first. Well, I started when it was still like podcasting was much smaller. I don't even know how many podcasts there are. It's like hundreds of thousands.
so many.
There's maybe
There's so many
like,
that like start and there's like an episode
Yeah,
or two and then they just
exactly.
stop.
Jay Shetty says there's 5 million right now.
oh yeah, that's great. So I think when I started it was like a couple hundred, maybe 200,000, something really small. So and then when I launched, I was on like some Spotify and Apple podcasts, like new and noteworthy. Now it's like even we have to apply to get, there's like an Airtable form you have to fill out in order to be considered. So I think it's a lot harder now, but back then I did two things. One, we knew our audience would be on YouTube, so we were like, we need to be on YouTube, but also B, I knew a lot of folks who were interested in Filipino American history and culture who weren't studying it, but maybe had an interest in it, were on Instagram and sharing stuff on social media. So I started an Instagram account, and that's sort of where I started my audience, and hashtags were still a thing, so that helped. And it just kind of grew from there, and then people would share it, and on Simplecast, you can see, these platforms show you like where your listeners are, and so
Yeah.
we would have people from all over the world.
It's
tune in.
surprising
So it's kind of
sometimes.
amazing. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, why are so many people in Germany
I
listening to
know,
this?
it's like,
Yeah.
how did you?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But I will also say that I remember I subscribed to your Patreon. So
Yeah,
that was
we did
one
that.
form that you
Yes.
used to, fund long distance
Yes.
and projects related to
Yeah.
it.
And I remember I had to like pause it, because I was like, ooh, we can't like work on this right now. And I remember like Patreon kind of sucked at the time, because you could only like pause it for a certain amount, and it would like turn back on, and you had to pause it again. And so I think I accidentally let it go, and so it charged everybody. And I was like, oh my gosh, so sorry, we'll refund you guys. And like I got some people writing me saying, no, keep the money, like can't wait for the next season. And it really is surprising how people, if they're interested in what you do and you're doing it in this independent way, that they will support. I mean, I'm on Substacks and I pay for a bunch, so but I will answer the second question, which is how we do the companion podcasts. Oh, man, we've done it different ways. It depends on what we're trying to do. There's no mandate at Proximity to make a companion podcast for every project. It's just our company loves podcasts, and when there's something interesting we want to pursue, we just try it. For the Wakanda Forever podcast, which is the first one I produced at the show, Ryan Coogler, our founder, the director of the film, and writer and producer, he had wanted to make a podcast about it before we even shot the film. And so when I was hired, it was like day one. It was like, this is the first show you must make. I was like, okay, how much time do I have? And going into that show, two things happened. Like since Ryan had decided to make the show, one is, or I wanted to make a show, one is obviously the passing of Chadwick Boseman, and then two, the pandemic. And so it's sort of developing the idea for it, because there was a version of this companion show that could be just like, talk to the cast and crew, how do you make the movie, like that more like DVD featurette. Do you guys know DVDs? That sort of more like kind of classic traditional BTS kind of content. But because I felt there was a story, like how did these people, these artists come together, out of grief to make art and to make the sequel to this gigantic cultural phenomenon, like to me, that was a story. And so, yeah, that podcast came out of that idea, and I just kind of outlined what 5-6 episodes would be, brought on Ta-Nehisi, and then kind of went from there. So it depends on what you want to focus on, I guess, and spotlight.
Yes.
Made you want to do interviews and become a journalist? Because I know you talked about when you were a child, you love yourself all the time, but what was like the turning point or like that one like realization that like made you into that?
It feels like there's a podcast question. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I was always filming myself, filming my family, and always asking questions, honestly. So there's always, I think, I was always curious about things. But why? That's a good question. I did journalism in high school, actually. I was the entertainment editor of the Californian in Santa Monica, Cal High. But to do like in this medium, I don't know. I think it goes back to like my interest in serial, and then like my parents are immigrants. We didn't grow up with public radio. That was something I discovered later on. So that style of NPR interviewing, it kind of came to it later, but I found it very interesting and I don't know, just curious about people and wanting to ask them questions and forcing them to be recorded.
Well, before we started today, Paola actually said, I'm doing this for you, but I normally don't like to be asked questions.
Yeah, it makes me very
So,
uncomfortable.
so thank
actually,
you for being out of your
No,
comfort
thank
zone
you.
doing
Actually,
it.
I'll say this. You said we met in that tour. Actually, we met because I interviewed you.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was, I forget what story, but I was writing something for LA Weekly and I hit you up. Yeah, no, it was a long time.
Oh,
ago.
yeah, it's
It was
true.
my baby journalist days, but yeah, see,
Oh,
even
it's
though I
true.
met her was through asking you.
Asking me questions
Yeah.
about something.
And also like I was just talking to someone about this. It's also, I think, why I'm a producer. I'm very persistent. I realized, I asked my dad once, I was like, what am I good at? He was like, you're persistent. I'm like, what? That's so boring. But I think because like, yeah, if I want to know something, I will like DM, I will, be nice about it, not be annoying and weird, but I do try to ask until I get the answer.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
I apologize for the exceedingly old ladiness of this question and the nerdiness of this question, but I'm really interested in, especially as an insider, in like the form and evolution, as you all were talking about, the pandemic of the podcast. And I love bringing technology into my classrooms. So I bring in things like BBC radio shows talking about public radio programs in from the 50s or the 80s, and they're paced and structured so differently. It necessitates a different kind of listening, and then I bring in MTV cuts from the 90s and the 80s and the VJ segments, and that also requires a different kind of watching and listening. And then I'm also thinking about like talk shows and how you can wash the dishes and watch them. So I was just wondering, like, and then and I find podcasts, like, I wonder what people are doing while they're watching and listening to them, because they're paced so differently. And so I'm wondering how conscious you are, or how you think about like what you would like people to absorb, how you want, is it like, okay, I'm thinking about like the person on the treadmill, like how are they, and because my students are also interested in making podcasts as final projects or things like that. And so I'm just wondering like how you think about how people absorb the information, or how you want to, in the modern world.
It's a great question. I think we're just so distracted now.
Yeah, right.
That like, it's interesting you bring BBC or like radio shows from the 50s, because another sort of inspiration to making long distance was my parents told me they grew up listening to the radio.
Right.
I don't know if you know the show. It was called Tia Deli, and it's this woman on the radio every weekend or something would tell stories, and I think it was a mix of kind of This American Life, honestly, where she would like say the theme or whatever, and then it was like radio drama, and like it was something my grandmother listened to. I think both of them. It was just a really popular show. My dad and mom would listen to that as kids. So I was just so intrigued by that and wanting to do like that version, but like modern for Filipino stories. But yeah, you do have to think about your audience. And man, I think now it's like, well, the proximity show that we do, honestly, because we're putting on video and I work with filmmakers, like we have to make it look great visually. Like it's just, but I do tell them like, hey, some people are literally just listening to this. They are not watching it. So it's okay if camera B is on our guest for 2 minutes. Like it's fine, And So that sort of changes a little bit of what we do, where we kind of, there's a flexibility, I guess, in how we present the visual version. But also, I mean, you just never know where your show is gonna end up. That's why I'm like, before I started Proximity, we didn't have social media, and we didn't have, by the way, I do that too, I creative direct, and we didn't have a website. And I said, hey, if you wanna do podcasts, we need a home, like a home base on the internet where all this stuff's gonna live, because you never know what app's gonna be like bought out and like shut down in how many years, right? And even though we're making this for YouTube, for Apple Podcasts, for Spotify, we're just making it the best thing possible so that no matter where it's gonna live, I don't know what's gonna happen to YouTube in 10 years, it'll still be the thing we wanted to make. Because right now, actually, our Sinners episodes, you can watch them on HBO Max. That's a new thing we're doing, and I think new for HBO, because they were doing companion podcasts, but all audio, but now we have 4 episodes that are video that are on there. And not in the extras, you know, BTS part, it's like its own little tile on the thing. So I guess it's a long way of answering your question, but basically, like, I do think about the experience, but I'm also like, how do we make it the best thing? So yeah, and also thinking about who the audience is. We found a lot of our audience is emerging filmmakers. So I see it through the comments, you know, and or like the episodes that do well or not. So we haven't done a survey yet. Have you done surveys?
Not really, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I think that we sort of intuitive, that they are helpful with Waiting to Exhale, which was our Gen X pop
Yes.
culture podcast. You know, part of us doing that show was that we realized as we branched off from our previous show, Pop Rocket, that the majority of the listeners were Gen X listeners and women, right? And
Right.
so it sort of like helped us sort of
Yeah,
kind of appeal to that particular
yeah.
demographic and niche, but
Yeah,
yeah.
we did a survey in season 1. And I think it helped us learn sort of age range and occupations. I think it'd be interesting to do one now, because like then we can, and honestly, we should ask, how do you listen to the show? In the car or like
Yeah.
washing dishes?
I will say that people talk about planning podcasts based on the timings of typical commutes. So there's a typical local commute is about 20 minutes. And then there are some that like the slightly longer ones, so about like 40 to 45 minutes. So when we are training some of our educational podcasters,
Yeah.
right? We give them the option of thinking about, well, do you want to do, you know, you could do these punchy little 20-minute episodes and aim for that. Or you could do, you know, something like around an hour or
Yeah.
45 minutes or what have you.
I like that, but I do feel like the suggestion to think of segments is so key, because going back to the old school radio, like that was appointment listening, right? Or TV appointment viewing.
Right.
That doesn't exist anymore. People are just watching stuff whenever. And so I feel like more than time, it's just having a structure that sort of hooks people, or like they know what they're gonna get when they listen or watch your thing. Because that's what happens to me. It's like, oh, what do I want to listen to right now? The industry talk show or a narrative show. And I'm like, oh, narrative's kind of long right now and I gotta do XYZ. I'll listen to the chat show. And it has like certain segments that I just know are gonna, you know.
But this one will be 10 minutes or 15 minutes or what
Yeah,
have you, yeah.
yeah.
There's a hand in the back. Oh, yeah, you.
Okay, before I get into my question, I just want to say I'm from Santa Monica, California. I'm in Buena
Hey.
Vista.
Oh, sick.
Um,
Oh.
But I was supposed to go to Cal
Oh,
High.
Bibles.
So I went to Ironburst Middle School and I.
Yes, my sister's in.
Is it alright if I ask a question specifically about the podcast?
Yeah, of course.
For our class, we listened to your podcast about tiki bars.
Oh, sick.
And I feel like it was kind of really eye-opening. I've been to tiki bars with my family before. I used to travel to Hawaii a lot because my parents were married there. And it kind of was eye-opening, being like, it really is like a fusion of different cultures and different foods and et cetera. And I was wondering, how did your view of tiki bars change in the process of researching tiki bars and then at the final product of finishing the podcast?
Yeah. Well, I'd never been to one until that podcast.
Really?
Yes, I wasn't like, I didn't really do it. I didn't go to those. It was more, I was just so interested in like, oh, these immigrant men at the time ended up kind of cosplaying Pacific Islander as like these bartenders, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, but also I had read like, I think in the 30s, a lot of extras for movies set in the Pacific, like Filipinos would be like background for that, or, and that just sort of intrigued me, because I was like, that's so weird, why? And yeah, going into it, I didn't have really an opinion, but I did kind of want to ask that question, like, is it cultural appropriation or is it appreciation? And I talked to a wide range of people, like Sven, who is like the tiki enthusiast. Like I went to his home and literally it's like tiki statues. I walk in, you know, it's like a tall grass and there's giant tiki statues, small, like this guy lives in Silver Lake. And like, but he like came here from Germany to be a cinematographer, but then fell in love with tiki bars and just loved the culture and loved that. And then, you know, I spoke with a Pacific Islander woman who was like, I met her, I think at just a festival, and she had never been to a tiki bar, I think. And then we ended up going together and she just found it just so weird. But she wasn't like mad about it, but it was more like, this is really odd to see sort of like an interpretation of your culture in this fun bar environment. But I also interviewed, you know, the owners of the Tiki Tea in Los Feliz, who like, their father was an original tiki bartender in the 30s, Ray Buchan, ended up worked for Don the Beachcomber and then ended up starting his own bar in the 60s. And that place is interesting because it's Filipino owned and run, but it's still a tiki bar. And so you come in, it's like these weird tchotchkes and like these little Filipino accents, but also like strange tiki things. So I don't know. I think coming out of that, I just wanted to hear what people thought. And I don't have any judgment on it. I think they're still fun and the drinks are a little too sweet and strong. But it's a fun environment. I do feel like it's a lot of fun to be in those places, but I think it's important to know, like, you know, this isn't real. And it's based on so many things. And honestly, a lot of negative stereotypes too, like some of the names of the drinks and just like, you know, the way women are sort of very exotified in these, you know, scenes in the bars. But yeah, you get a wide range of people. And some people actually got very angry with me when I did that story.
I think that, but the way that you sort of depicted your feelings about it and by framing it as like neither like, you know, judgmental or negative, but like, but just needing to know, like the curiosity in and of itself. I think you don't have to land on,
Yeah.
you know, like a kind of hard stance either way
Yeah,
necessarily.
and I'll say this, I also got a little criticism from some Pacific Islander folks who were like, why are you telling this story? You're not Pacific Islander, you know? So, I mean, you get it from all different directions sometimes. Like,
Yes.
I'm just glad I made something that kind of sparked the conversation and made people think about it in a different way. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
This will be our last question. Yeah.
Okay. What is your projected goal for in proximity?
Oh man, putting me on the spot. Yeah, I mean, well, I was asked to host it, so my bosses were like, hey, you used to do this. So when they asked me to do it, the idea really was, can we kind of grow this into something more that's like a weekly show or something more regular? Because at the time we've been doing it seasonal. Honestly, because our main host and the others were not always available. They had other jobs. So yeah, I just kind of want to grow it and see what it can turn into. I mean, it's really interesting to be in the podcast space because you have people doing it still from their bedrooms or at home, DIY. And then you have people who have giant production teams making this. But then you have Ira Glass, who now, I mean, they're the biggest narrative podcast and radio show. They're like a legend in the industry, but they're like, they need support. Like they're asking for like subscriptions and financial support right now. So it's hard to do it at that level in that way. So I don't know, I guess for me, for our show, and what I've learned also just being in the podcast industry, you got to figure out like what is success and what is the sandbox you guys want to play in. Because we don't need to or want to really compete with the controversial, I shall not name them, controversial chat shows, because like that's just not the kind of show we're gonna be, right? But what is sort of our sandbox? Who is our audience, and then how can we continue to kind of bring content and bring conversations to that audience and grow? So yeah, and I'd love to be, you know, more episodes on HBO Max, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. And I think that also just to add, like with the consortium, I think that part of it is just being adopted into classrooms. That's the first step, right? Is some of these shows doing that. But one of the shows that we do for it is just a sort of fun project that is a recap of The Amazing Race, but from an LGBTQ point of
That's
view.
awesome.
Called
Those are the
the
best
Gay
kind of
Amazing
shows.
Race. Yeah, but like, so and then we're like, what is our goal? What was our
Yeah.
goal? Our goal was just to be part of the conversation
Mm-hmm.
and I guess part of the Amazing Race lore, and now it's just
Yeah.
sort of like its own thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's maybe all there is. We're not gonna make a bunch of money off it because it's part of a nonprofit, kind of umbrella. But we also teach things about LGBT studies and
That's awesome.
feminism and all these things amidst these lessons and the dynamics. So, but you'll figure out your goals, as Paula says. Please thank her again for coming and putting yourself.
Thank you.
All right.